You know, when we think of spies, we usually think of the movies. But the real world of espionage, well, it's a world of shadows, where your identity is everything, and just one tiny mistake can be fatal. And the most incredible stories? They don't happen on a screen. They happen on the dusty streets of a foreign city.
So picture this. It's the 1980s. You're in Lahore, Pakistan. A man, dressed to blend in perfectly, kurta, cap, a full beard, is walking by a mosque when an old Maulana, a religious cleric, stops him. He just looks him over, really carefully, with this piercing gaze that seems to see right through the disguise. And then he asks a question that, in this place, at this time, is basically a death sentence. He asks, "Are you a Hindu?" The man stops, he smiles calmly, and says, "No." But you can tell the Maulana isn't buying it. He leads the man into a small, locked room. And this is where you see just how thin the line is for these agents. The Maulana points to the man's ears. They're pierced. It's a tiny cultural slip-up, something not very common for Muslim men in Pakistan. "You're caught," he says. I mean, imagine being in that silent room. Your heart must have just stopped. If this cleric is an informant for Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, well, that's it. It's over.
But this guy, he doesn't flinch. His mind is racing, and he comes up with the only plausible explanation. "I was a Hindu," he says, "but I converted to Islam later in life." It's a total gamble, a story that has to hold up.
And this is where the story takes a turn you just would not see coming. The Maulana looks at him and then slowly opens up a hidden cupboard. And inside, there are idols of the Hindu deities, Lord Shiva and Goddess Durga. "I am a Hindu too," the cleric confesses. Turns out his entire family was killed during the partition back in 1947. He only survived because he converted, and he's been living a lie ever since. And then he gives the man some life-saving advice. Get plastic surgery, or one day someone else will catch you.
So who was this man? The man who walked out of that room and sent a report back to India that very same night. This wasn't some character from a spy novel. He was Ajit Doval, India's most formidable spy, operating for years right in the heart of enemy territory.
But that incredible story, believe it or not, that's not even where his journey begins. To really understand the man, the spy master, the strategist he would become, we have to go all the way back to the start, to his origins in a quiet mountain village.
So here's how we'll break it down. We've heard about the spy in Lahore. Now we'll rewind to his early years, see how he became the Intelligence Bureau's top agent, dive into his decades of deception, and then explore how he became the National Security Advisor and created the Doval Doctrine. So where did this man of steel come from? Well, it all started in a small village in Uttarakhand, where discipline wasn't learned in a spy agency, but right at home.
He was born back in 1945, the son of an army officer, so military discipline was just a part of his upbringing. He was clearly brilliant, clearing India's toughest civil service exam on his very first try in 1968 and joining the police. But it was an incident in 1971 that really put him on the map. He was sent to handle a raging communal riot, but he didn't use force. He used his mind. He actually went and met with both sides and managed to de-escalate the whole situation without a single bullet being fired. Well, that got people's attention. The very next year, the Intelligence Bureau came calling, and Ajit Doval stepped into the world of shadows.
And he wasn't just any recruit. Doval almost immediately proved he was an exceptional field agent, taking on some of the country's most volatile and dangerous conflicts. I mean, he made an impact with incredible speed. In Mizoram, where the army was really struggling, he went in, he met with rebel leaders, and he brought them to the negotiating table, ending a long-running insurgency. Then in Sikkim, he did all the crucial groundwork to make sure its merger with India in 1975 went smoothly. For all this, he got a top police medal, an honor that usually takes 14 years of service to earn. Doval got it in just 7. They had to make an exception for him, and it definitely wouldn't be the last time.
But as impressive as those missions were, they were really just the warm-up. The next phase of his career would see him take on some of the riskiest undercover operations in Indian history.
7. Just think about that number for a second. That's how many years he spent deep undercover in Pakistan. That's an eternity, in a place where one wrong word, one wrong gesture could mean the end. He had to learn Urdu, memorize Pakistani culture and history, and understand Islamic practices so deeply that no one could possibly doubt his identity. And his creativity, it was just off the charts. For instance, Pakistan was secretly developing a nuclear bomb, and India desperately needed proof. So outside a barbershop near their main research center, a place all the nuclear scientists went,
sat a beggar, and that beggar was Ajit Doval. He would collect their discarded hair from the shop, which was then sent back to India. Sure enough, lab tests revealed traces of radiation, and that was the first concrete proof of Pakistan's nuclear program.
His audacity was just unmatched. In 1988, militants had taken over the Golden Temple in Punjab. No one could get inside, except a humble rickshaw puller. That was Doval. He went up to the militants and convinced them he was an ISI agent sent from Pakistan to help their cause. And they let him in. For days, he lived right there among them, mapping all their positions, counting their weapons, and feeding every single detail back to India's commandos. So when Operation Black Thunder finally launched, the commandos knew exactly where to strike. The raid was a huge success, with minimal casualties, and the holy site was preserved.
So after decades in the field, literally living life on a knife's edge, Doval's journey took another major turn. He went from being an actor in the shadows to becoming the architect of India's entire security strategy. A really pivotal moment came in 1999. A passenger flight was hijacked and flown to Taliban-controlled Kandahar, and Doval was on the negotiating team. After 7 agonizing days, India had to release 3 hardcore terrorists just to save the passengers. Doval never, ever forgot that feeling of helplessness. It was a moment that forged a deep conviction in him. India would never be that helpless again. It needed to be on the offensive, not just reactive.
And this big shift in thinking is really the core of what's now called the Doval Doctrine. So instead of just responding after an attack, India would proactively go out and neutralize threats at their source. Instead of negotiating from a position of weakness, it would take the fight to the enemy and dictate terms from a position of strength.
Fast forward to 2014, when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. One of his very first appointments was making Ajit Doval the National Security Advisor. The man who had spent his life in the field was now in charge of the entire board. His doctrine was about to become national policy.
And you could see the results almost immediately. After the 2016 Uri attack, India launched surgical strikes across the line of control for the first time. After the 2019 Pulwama attack, Indian jets conducted an airstrike deep inside Pakistan. He personally oversaw security during the abrogation of Article 370 in Kashmir, and when tensions flared with China in 2020, it was Doval who engaged in direct talks to de-escalate the crisis. In pretty much every major security challenge, his fingerprints were on the file.
He never held a gun, never wore a uniform, never gave big speeches. His job was to walk among the enemy, speak their language, win their trust, and then break them from the inside. There's a saying that goes, James Bond is a fictional character, Ajit Doval is real. And what's real is always more dangerous, and frankly, more fascinating than fiction.
His entire life was lived behind a curtain, invisible to most of us. And it kind of leaves you with the question, doesn't it? What does a life spent entirely in the shadows really tell us about the hidden forces, the silent moves and countermoves that shape the world we see every single day?